For many years, Nintendo is committed to releasing a variety of retro-themed controllers to pair with their Nintendo Switch Online service. They've done controllers for NES, SNES, Genesis, and N64, all of which intended to provide the most system-accurate control scheme to emulate games using the service. Now, with the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, they've released a GameCube controller replica to tie in with the launch of GameCube games on NSO. Certain folks will undoubtedly feel it strikes the right nostalgia chord and immediately slap down the $65 to purchase it. But here on Game Data, we feel that nostalgia is a bad reason to purchase new electronics. With that in mind, let's go over how well the controller works for NSO and as a Switch 2 controller more broadly, to see if it might be even worth your time. Starting with the basics, Nintendo's new GameCube controller feels remarkably similar to their old GameCube controller, pushable triggers and all. Like the old controller, it feels a lot lighter than I'd initially guess. It doesn't feel cheap by any means, but I'm guessing it'll throw off anyone who hasn't touched a GameCube controller in a while. Unlike the original controller, the NSO controller also comes packed with an expected slew of modern features. That includes Bluetooth, a built-in USB-C rechargeable battery, and motion controls. It all works well with the Switch 2, and feels far less clunky than my old Wavebird controller when losing horribly at F-Zero GX. For folks less interested in GameCube games, Nintendo also included additional modern buttons like ZL, Home, Capture, and Game Chat to help with feature parity for their other new controllers. The only core feature that's missing is Amiibo support, which is kinda expected on this type of controller. Each of the new buttons are small and positioned in a way that's a bit difficult to use without memorizing the layout. That's likely on purpose though. Nintendo wanted the look to adhere as closely to the original controller's design as they could. Making new buttons almost invisible makes that possible without skimping on features. Whether that's a deal breaker is entirely a personal decision. Just note that I did get used to the button placement within an hour or so of playing. In terms of actual button feel, there are no real surprises to this controller. When playing Soul Calibur 2, it feels exactly the same as if I used one of my wired controllers, just a lot newer. The A button is easy to spam with just a bit of resistance at its bottom. X, Y, and B are easy to push and satisfying to roll my thumb onto. Both analog triggers feel appropriately springy with an extra little crunchy step at the end. And both sticks have just the right amount of resistance against the familiar feel of its octagonal stick gates. Again, if you've used a GameCube controller, you already know what to expect here. The only real difference to this controller's input is that the D-pad doesn't completely suck. Compared to my other, admittedly aging controllers, the new D-pad has a bit more travel and feels a bit more tactile. I still wouldn't recommend using this controller for D-pad heavy games, but it's an appreciated update nonetheless. Unlike playing on original hardware, controls are also very easy to remap in NSO. Unlike emulators on other platforms, a game does need to be launched before the option to remap becomes available. That means no global remapping, and, well, that's a potential pain, but also potentially less hassle when only certain games do need to be altered. The layout for remapping is also a bit different than folks might see with programs like Dolphin. Each individual button is annotated for its in-game action. To be honest, I found it a bit cluttered at first, but I could see it being helpful for folks who haven't memorized controller layouts for a game they're looking to update. Either way, it's been a godsend for jumping back into Wind Waker and reversing camera controls. Inverted cameras will forever be the death of me, and I'm happy to not have to bear through them during testing. Just don't expect the remapping to also update in-game prompts. As many others have rightfully pointed out, games like Wind Waker that rely on directional prompts for gameplay may get awkward with heavy remapping. I'm not too put off by it personally, considering I'd face the same issue playing the game elsewhere. It's just something to keep in mind if you plan to play NSO GameCube games. Which you will if you pick up this controller. After all, it's a GameCube controller and pretty much the ideal way to play these games. Playing with other controllers isn't a huge mental leap, but having the same layout as depicted in menus and the expected layout for certain button combinations will always feel better, at least to me. Although, currently NSO only has 3 GameCube games. That'll undoubtedly increase over time, and the first 3 games are huge time sinks for anyone who missed them years ago. But 3 games aren't necessarily a reason to buy a new controller with a unique layout. So, how does it handle Switch and Switch 2 games? Well, outside NSO, GameCube layout can be a bit hit or miss. While I adore having the expected control scheme for GameCube games, newer games expect a radically different layout. Buttons are expected to be arranged differently, most Switch games don't utilize analog triggers, and the nubby C-stick isn't the most precise for shooters. In general, if a game's control scheme doesn't fit with the GameCube layout, it's generally not a good time. Splatoon 3 is probably the best example of this. It technically works, but the controls don't quite line up. Within matches, the A button's not used at all, and for some reason Z and ZL are treated as triggers, which does not feel great, and the lack of clickable sticks prevents activating special weapons. While it might be a good time for a challenge run, it's a bit too large of a handicap for most folks. Unlike Nintendo's other first-party controllers, these retro-themed controllers also can't be remapped in settings. I'm not sure why Nintendo's opted to disable this feature, but in effect, it'll mean that most Switch and Switch 2 games just won't feel right to play with this controller. However, not all is doom and gloom. Some games actually shine with this controller. As might be expected, Super Mario Sunshine via 3D All-Stars makes full use of analog triggers. The newer components also feel much better than when playing Sunshine with an original controller on original hardware. This game will likely come to NSO at some point, and I hope they bring this exact version. It's full screen with a slight graphical upgrade and removable inverted camera controls in-game. I can't really think of a better way to play this game right now. Other games, like Pokemon Violet, that don't use the entirety of the controller also feel pretty good to play with the controller. The shape of the shell and triggers lend it to be surprisingly comfortable to hold for long play sessions. Its overall lightness might also be a bonus for folks looking for something just a bit less dense than the Pro Controller, but more substantial than Joy-Cons. In general, there are plenty of games that will feel pretty great to play with the GameCube controller. It's just that many more will feel a bit compromised. As a result, I probably wouldn't recommend it over controllers with more modern layouts, unless someone really enjoyed GameCube games. That is, unless you play Mario Kart. For Mario Kart World or 8 Deluxe, the GameCube controller's a no-brainer. Decent grips, comfortable triggers, and a large A button plastered on its front are pretty much ideal for the modern Mario Kart control scheme, and feels a lot more natural in hand than most other controllers. As much as I enjoy playing NSO games with this controller, I've probably had the most fun zipping around tracks in Mario Kart World. It just feels right, in a way that Joy-Cons or the Pro Controller don't entirely replicate. If there's one point of tension here, it's just that the trigger's long travel add just a split second more to activating an item or jumping into a slide. Their resistance also takes just a bit more effort than the digital triggers on other Switch controllers. But still, they're just so satisfying. Pulling back on the triggers during gameplay is such a tactile delight that adds just a little bit of extra feedback to the game. Something about it just hits me the right way while playing, and I kinda wish I had this controller years ago when the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC dropped. Out of all my usage with this controller so far, Mario Kart's probably sold me the hardest on its value. Which ultimately brings us to the main question of this video. Should you buy this controller? And, well, as I mentioned, if you're looking for a general controller to play all your Switch games, this obviously isn't it. The layout isn't going to be universally comfortable or usable for all games. You'd be better off looking for a different controller. However, If you plan on playing NSO's GameCube library a ton, have a game that meshes well with GameCube layout, or you're a huge fan of Mario Kart, there's actually a fair bit of value to this controller. It has a comfortable controller layout, and it feels great to play with those games. Because it's a first-party controller, build quality is also pretty decent, and pairing is simple. It's going to be a good time in a way that hasn't necessarily been the case for a ton of third-party GameCube-style controllers over the years. You will be paying a premium for that luxury, though. If you don't mind a wired connection, losing modern buttons, and don't use motion, adapters for original controllers are still readily available and work with the Switch 2 for much less money. Similarly, if you want wireless and don't mind some additional setup, 8-Bit Do sells a mod kit for original controllers to make them into Switch controllers. The kit costs $26, and 4 parts GameCube controllers are findable for about $20 to $25, maybe less. All in, that's about $15 cheaper than Nintendo's own offering, without Nintendo's own hurdles of limited availability and Nintendo Switch Online membership. All of which is a valid reason to at least shop for a third-party option. Buying Nintendo's own controller for Switch 2 gameplay is very much a decision for convenience and guaranteed quality. For me, I would rather pay a bit extra to have something that looks and behaves exactly how I want. But for y'all, maybe budget is more of a factor, or you already have a GameCube controller that you want to use or needs repair. If that's the case, then there are clearly cheaper options. To wrap things up, Nintendo's once more created a modern wireless controller that looks and feels exactly like one of their older controllers. It works fantastically with Nintendo Switch Online and has some additional modern inputs to make it easier to use with some newer games. Unfortunately, comfort when used with modern games varies greatly. Certain games feel excellent, and others are barely functional due to a lack of system-wide remapping. But as someone who plays a lot of Mario Kart and is looking forward to playing more GameCube games on Switch 2, I've found it to work great for my needs. For all these reasons, I'm quite happy with my own purchase and will likely lean on it when playing certain games when docked. Whether you will be happy with the controller will depend entirely on how much you value its convenience factor over the potential savings of third-party or wired options. Either way, it's a good time for modern GameCube gaming. Those have been my thoughts, though. Now's the time when I ask for yours. Have you picked up one of the new GameCube controllers yet? Have you been eyeing it but have additional questions? Or is there a different GameCube-style Switch controller that you absolutely swear by? Let me know down in the comments. As always, if you found this video helpful or informative, give it a like to let me know, then get subscribed for more controller reviews in the near future. As some of you may have noticed, I solely focused on how well the new controller handles gaming on the Switch 2. That's because, at least as of this recording, operating systems, gaming platforms, and emulators haven't really updated to recognize input from Switch 2 controllers in general. It's a pain, but entirely expected of controllers for any new platform. When that changes, expect to see a pinned comment down below with some usability info, and I'll likely also be posting a head-to-head comparison with 8-Bit Do's mod kit for GameCube games on Switch 2, emulation, and original hardware. Just be sure to get subscribed so that you don't miss out on it. But anyway, that's going to be all for this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way until the end, and until next time, catch you later.